Welcome to the Lazy CEO Podcast, where Jim Schleckser, author of Great CEOs Are Lazy and founder of the CEO Project, features compelling experts and topics for CEOs of mid to large-size companies. Now, let's get started with the show.
Welcome, everybody, to another Lazy CEO podcast. My name is Jim Schleckser. I am your host, and I am the CEO of the CEO Project. Well, today we've got a fascinating guest with us, somebody who has spoken all over the world to companies that roll off your tongue like your kids' names, and a really notable guy in a couple of areas. But he's written a new book that we're going to really delve into today. And my guest today is named Joey Coleman. Joey is the chief experience composer of design Symphony, but I really know him as just a remarkable speaker and influencer in the area of both customer experience, but now more recently, employee experience, which is what we're going to dig into today. So welcome, Joey.
Jim, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's such a pleasure to be here. And thanks to everybody who's listening in. So appreciate you joining us for some time today.
Absolutely. Well, we got so much to talk about and only a certain amount of time, but why don't we just start with let's go just touch briefly on your first book and kind of the thought set that you have there on customer experience. You spent a lot of time in that area and obviously super important, and you've riffed that over to employee, but tell me just give me like a couple of minutes on that. And then we'll move over to employee experience, if you don't mind.
Sure. So my first book was called Never Lose a Customer Again. Right. And the premise of this book was we work so hard to, market and sell and fill the funnel and drive people to our businesses. And then once they actually become a customer, we have a tendency not to pay attention to them. And when we don't pay attention to them, they leave. The kind of overarching statistical takeaway of the first book, Never Lose a Customer Again, is that 20 to 70% of your new customers will decide to stop doing business with you before they reach the 100-day anniversary. Mm-hmm. So the book outlines a framework and a methodology, over 46 case studies from companies that are really remarkable at creating great customer experiences to hopefully inspire folks and give them a context and a philosophy and a mindset to get better at customer experience. Yeah. Now, to be honest, Jim, I had been in the customer experience space for about 5 minutes when I realized that you can't have a great customer experience if you don't have a great employee experience, because who's delivering the customer experience? It's your employees. Yep. If I were to put both of those ideas into a single book, the book would have been 12,000 pages long. Yeah. So what we did is we decided that the first book would focus on the customer experience. The second book would focus on the employee experience. And it's also the case that in most organizations, customer experience falls under the purview of marketing, sales, your account management team. Whereas employee experience, as a general rule, falls under the purview of the human resources department, the HR team. And if there's one thing I've learned consulting with businesses around the world over the last 20 years is that those teams are pretty siloed. It's pretty rare that they interact. And with all due respect to my friends in HR, if anyone in an organization is told, we're going to invite HR to this meeting as well, everybody gets nervous. Everybody starts freaking out. Like, do I need to bring a cardboard box? Am I going to be escorted out by security? Am I about to be fired? As opposed to what I think we should do is invite HR, i.e. the employee experience, to every meeting. What are we doing to make the employee experience better across our organization? Because that's necessarily going to improve every aspect of our operation.
Nice. This, it's funny. I used to work at a company, and the HR guy, his name was Art Burdett. And when you got invited to breakfast with Art, it was never going to be a good day. Right. Like, oh no, Art's going to invite me to breakfast. It's all over.
and Jim, I feel for my friends in HR, right? In human resources. Okay. I'm a recovering attorney. The first step's admitting you have a problem. There's 11 steps
there
after
actually
that.
Is no cure.
Right. There is no cure. You just acknowledge and you try to move better. But it's kind of the same thing. Like, we're going to invite our lawyer to this meeting. Everybody starts getting nervous. There's no reason for that. We can embrace the different aspects of our business and have them be part of the conversation.
There's some great work in the area of, like Customer Comes Second and some other books that talk in this area. So I fully align with your line of thinking. But how do you get there? Because the other stat that I think is relevant is the level of disengagement of employees. And we got a good friend, Jim Howden, who's been one of our members for years at Root Learning, and they talk a lot about employee engagement. And it is shocking how few people are engaged at work.
It's shocking. I mean, the most recent large-scale research that I've seen on this came out less than 60 days ago from Gallup. And if you combine all the numbers, you end up with somewhere around 77% of workers are disengaged at work. They're either quiet quitting or loudly quitting. One of the two, right? And when we stop and think about that, what I often ask leaders to do is, instead of thinking of these statistics in terms of, oh, this is just a big problem, which, give or take, 27%, 23%. I was told there would be no math on the show today. I get it'd be 23%. Which 23% of your employees are engaged? Because you need to realize that the 77% aren't. Yep. So start looking at your actual team and figuring out, are they engaged or not? And be honest. I think lots of times we think of engagement as this amorphous measurement tool of, well, they're kind of engaged. You're either engaged or you're not. This isn't sure, it's a sliding scale in terms of the degree of engagement, but in most of the research that points to this, we're talking about folks that are just counting the days. They're not there. They're physically there, but they're not there, as they would say.
We actually talk about mercenaries and patriots too, right? So patriots bleed the company colors all in all the time. And there's mercenaries like, I'm here for right now, but if a better deal came, I'd be like, there's a whole different vibe. So they're engaged, but not the way the patriots are. It's a whole different level of engagement that occurs.
Absolutely. And there are times in your business career where you might need to staff up with mercenaries, and that's okay. I'm not opposed to that. In fact, at the risk of having a sports analogy this early into the conversation, and anyone who's not a sports fan, I don't want to alienate you.
Come on, Joey, play ball.
But what I will say is, I think every business leader could learn something from college athletics coaches. And the thing they could learn is as follows. If you're the head football coach, for example, and you're recruiting players out of high school to come to your college, that at best, you've got them for 6 years.
Yep.
Practically, if they're really talented, you've probably got them for 3.
Yep.
And I wonder how our operations as business leaders would change if we realized we're not recruiting to have an employee for 20 years.
Yep.
We're recruiting to get the best employee to contribute their best skill and their best insight for a period of 3 to 5 years. That, I'd like to think, takes the pressure off us a little bit and might allow us to go after some folks who would be interested in making that level of commitment, but aren't interested in a 20+ year commitment, because let's be frank, those commitments don't really exist in the marketplace anymore. Right. I would posit that maybe they never did, but they certainly don't exist now.
Okay. And we had conversations around, I don't want to hire this individual because they're so good they won't stay. And I go, whoa. Stop. They'll be there for a while. They'll be amazing while they're here. They'll make your company better. They'll get better. And then they're going to leave. Are you worse off for that? No, you're better. And so are they. Like, that's a good deal. But people struggle to wrap their head around that idea of sort of sequential, temporary, serial monogamy, if you will, right?
Well, I agree, Jim. And I think part of the problem is, and I say this respectfully, but I think many of the business leaders today are operating with a mindset and mentality that is more appropriate to 2 generations ago.
Yeah.
We're thinking, we're hiring someone to work here for 30 or 40 years and get the gold watch. By the way, people aren't wearing the watches anymore. They're carrying a cell phone so they know what time it is. Second of all, you quit giving the watches a long time ago. Third of all, you're not doing the same thing you were doing 10 years ago. Why should you expect an employee to do the same thing for a decade or more? Right. It's a mindset that is archaic in its nature, and as a result causes real challenges in our business operations.
Interesting. So, I looked through the book a bit, and, we talk about the cost of retention, but you really go into the first 100 days, and and very similar to your title of composer, you're composing an experience for that employee in the first 100 days. So, and you got a framework for that. So help us with, how should we be thinking about engaging with employees to try to make their experience as best as they can, so they stay and deliver their value for whatever that 3 to 6 or whatever number of period of years are going to, how help us through the framework, help us understand that.
Well, I think there's two pieces of this puzzle, Jim. Why do we focus specifically on the first 100 days? Good. And then secondarily, what should we do in those first 100 days? So here's why we focus on the first 100 days. The research shows that regardless of industry, regardless of role, regardless of position, somewhere between 20 and 60% of your new hires are going to quit before the 100-day anniversary of their employment. I'm going to just let that sink in a bit.
20 to 50?
20 to 60%, depending on the role and depending on your industry. That's the variation. Wow. Okay. Now, if it's hourly employees, that skews much, much higher. If it's salary employees, it's towards the lower end of that range as a general statement. So before we go any further, it's like, okay, stop and recognize that all these folks you're working hard to recruit, to hire, to take them through your interview process, to get them on board, to bring them into your team, 20 to 60% are going to run out the back door as quickly as you brought them out the front door. Now, that does a number of things. It crushes productivity. Yep. It crushes any semblance of efficiency. We haven't recouped our marketing costs to get them in the door and a hiring cost. But most importantly, it destroys morale, because here's how that works. Let's say Sharon comes in and she's the new employee. Jim and I are working together, and all of a sudden Sharon leaves after 3 weeks. What happens? Well, our boss comes to Jim and I and says, hey, sorry, Sharon didn't work out, but what we're going to need you guys to do is pick up the slack on her work while we get someone hired. Don't worry, it's going to be a short amount of time because we're just going to get a warm body in. Ooh, that's problematic. Yeah. Or, hey, you guys are going to have to do this, but don't worry, this time we're going to think a lot more strategically about it and make sure we get someone who's going to stay, which basically just told me I'm going to do twice as much work as I normally do with no raise and no title bump. Yeah, then I go home to my spouse and I say, so Sharon was here for 2 weeks and decided it wasn't good. What does Sharon know that I didn't know? Yep. And now I start thinking about quitting. So it's a double whammy that's getting us both ways. And all of this is happening in the first 100 days of employment. So that's why we focus on that time period. The second part. Oh,
that's a horrible leaky bucket. I mean,
it's a horrible leaky bucket.
Right. He's like, I'm going to haul water and the bucket's got, that just makes no sense. So I actually ran a company recently where we had this idea of customer retention was a real problem. I said, look, we've got a leaky bucket problem. And we're not going to haul water until we fix the bucket, and then we're going to haul water.
Yes.
So bring us down to how do we fix the leaky bucket problem?
So this is the challenge. We then need to look at the employee journey. So that's the second part. How do we think about this? Well, in the same way that folks listening might be familiar with the idea of a customer journey, how to take someone from being a prospect to being a raving fan. What is the equivalent journey in the employee life cycle? Because right now, most business leaders think of the employee journey as follows. We're going to post some job ads. We're going to get a couple candidates in. We're going to interview them. They're going to come for the first day on the job. By the second day on the job, they're going to know what they're doing, and hopefully they stay for a decade. That's our vision of the employee journey. This is fundamentally flawed from the outset. Yeah. I believe there are 8 phases to the employee journey that go from the first moment that they consider coming to work for you to the point where they are a raving fan advocate, singing your praises far and wide, writing reviews on Glassdoor, doing the type of activities and behaviors that give you signals that they are 100% engaged and bought in. And the opening volley is to say, well, what are those 8 phases? What are we doing to make sure those 8 phases are remarkable? And then to our conversation earlier, let's look at our existing base of employees and assign them to which phase they're in. Because even though if they've been there for, any more than 100 days, they should probably be in one of the latter phases. What I find in my consulting work is that a lot of employees could have been there for a year or two, and they're still in phase 4 or 5.
Wow.
They're early on. They never graduated out of those phases of connection to the enterprise, and they've stalled out. And what do we need to do to reinvigorate and push those folks forward?
That's phenomenal. Yeah. And I've seen that. We used to use in JC's a model of, we called it ROAR, which is only 4 stages, but it was recruit, orient, activate, and retain was the model. So at least this gave us something to hang our hat on. I think this is probably much more sophisticated than ROAR, but For me, it was easy to remember. So
it is easy to remember. What I'll say about this, and I want to be clear, in my world, and it doesn't have to be this in anyone listening's world, right? I think there's a significant difference between orientation and onboarding. And I think the fundamental distinction between those two words is probably causing north of 90% of the problems organizations have with getting people on board. Orientation is allowing a new employee to get familiar with their environment. It's things like, oh, the bathroom is down this hall. This is when we take lunch breaks. Here are the restaurants that are nearby that we'd recommend you go to. Here are some of the other people you might interact with. Oh, if there's a fire, here's what you do. Ironically enough, you would have these exact same conversations if you went on a cruise. They would tell you, oh, by the way, this is where you eat. Here's where the bathrooms are. If there's a fire, run for these boats, right? That's orientation. Onboarding is inviting in new employees using a managed, structured series of contacts that are designed to create a warm and welcoming experience. So it's a broader definition. It's a more comprehensive experience. And it's something that is designed to create emotional impacts, not tactical knowledge. That's to me the difference between onboarding and orientation.
You know, I've done some work on strategy. Well, actually customer retention. I did some work there. People are really focused on the technical matter of customer retention, and they ignore the relational element of it. And it turns out that dominates the equation. So I'm just echoing what you said. It shows up in a lot of places.
100%. How humans feel should be our primary driver. This applies with your customers. It applies with your employees. It applies with your significant other. It applies with your children, your grandchildren, your nieces, your nephews, your roommate, your best friend, your cousins, your neighbors, any human being you interact with. If you come first from a place of what is the emotional, personal and emotional connection that I have with this person, that's going to represent the bulk of the value of this interaction for both parties.
Interesting. But this process starts before they ever walk in the door. And this is similar to, good companies thinking about who is my ideal customer and making sure I'm talking to people that look like my ideal customer, because I know if they come here, they're going to stay a long time. You do the same thing with employees. So talk a little bit about, like, before they even walk in the door, before we even get engaged with them, there's things you do to try to make sure we get the right kind of people in front of us. So help us through that a little bit.
Absolutely, Jim. The first phase in the 8-phase process, all the phases, by the way, start with the letter A. And it's kind of like exactly. And it's kind of like if you get all of the phases right, it's like getting straight A's on your report card from your employees. Okay. So here's the model. The first phase is the assess phase. This is when a prospective employee is trying to decide whether or not they want to join your organization, and your organization is trying to decide whether this is the one. So this includes when they go and they first look at your job listing or your job posting or your classified ad. It's them going through your hiring process. So whether they're submitting a resume or an application or videos or whatever they're doing, any interviews that are happening, they're checking out your social media feeds. They're checking out the About Us page and the careers page on your website. They're having conversations with people that they know from LinkedIn that also work at your organization, right? So there's a lot happening here that most organizations at best are haphazard about, and often are being really derelict in their duty of thinking strategically about all these touch points. To your point, when you are thinking about anything that is candidate facing, you want those communications to do two things. You definitely want them to attract, as you mentioned, who is going to be the right fit. But I would posit you want your job listings and your advertisements to be as effective at repelling the wrong candidate as they are as effective at attracting the right candidate. And the way we do that is we let our brand spirit come out. We let them see the truth from the beginning. If we're a playful, fun organization, our job listing reads as playful and fun. If we're a more buttoned up, hey, letter of the law type organization, our communications feel like that. We're previewing the experience of what it's like to be an employee to the candidate, so they start to understand this is the environment I'm about to go into should I decide to accept a job offer.
You're making me laugh. I love that. And there are some organizations, one in particular I'm thinking of that I dealt with, that their truth in advertising would have to look like our level of incompetence is only exceeded by how political and backbiting right? Like nobody would ever apply, but it would be truthful, right?
But it would be truthful. And that's the thing. And so then to your point earlier, we get to decide, are we going to fix the leaky bucket? Or are we going to just keep throwing water into it? We might want to fix it.
Today, they're just filling the bucket, but that's okay. So let's say we go through the assess phase. They have, we've done the dating thing and we think, okay, there's a fit here. Where do we go to next?
The next phase is the accept phase. The accept phase has two component parts. We decide this is the candidate we want and we extend the offer. Mm-hmm. If we're lucky, that desired candidate accepts our job offer. Mm-hmm. Now, the secret in this phase is to make that actual offer feel like an invitation to the next chapter of their lives, instead of a memo written by a lawyer. Yeah. Now, what I mean by that is so many job offer letters are filled with legalese. And I'm not anti-lawyer. I'm not anti-following the law. This is important, right? But your opening volley should not feel like a contract with huge penalties if the person accepts, and kind of this arm's reach prenup, which so many start with, where we're a paragraph in and they're like, by the way, this isn't a contract of employment. This is an offer letter, and we're an at-will employer, which means we can let you go at any time we want. I'm like, the meal that we've ordered together,
be still my heart.
Oh my gosh, exactly. It's like being on a date and being told like, hey, don't enjoy that first bite because I might leave before you eat your second bite. It's like, what are we doing? We can do better. Yeah. So instead, when someone receives your offer, they should feel like they've just been invited to a magical, amazing next chapter of their life. So even the language we use, we can think about more strategically.
That's phenomenal. I love the next phase, which was affirm. And the whole idea of buyer's remorse, that little gap between I said yes and I haven't started yet, that feels like shark infested territory in terms of retention to me.
100%, Jim. You're spot on. In customer parlance, we'd refer to this as buyer's remorse. In the employee context, I think of it as new hires remorse. Okay. And what's interesting about new hires remorse, this isn't just Joey's cutesy title he put on something. This is scientifically proven to happen with every employee who accepts a job offer. Immediately after they accept the job offer, the dopamine that had flooded their brain and they felt joy, euphoria, and excitement about what this new job could be, when that starts to recede, those feelings are replaced by fear and doubt and uncertainty. Sure. What if this job isn't everything it's cracked up to be? I know I like the interview process, but am I going to actually be working with the person I interviewed with? Maybe I should have negotiated a little for a better salary. I pushed back the first time after they came with the offer, but maybe I should have pushed back again to get even more. Or what is the biggest issue is that often the top talent that's interviewing with us is also interviewing with other organizations that they haven't heard back from yet. So now they're wondering, well, I had to accept this offer because there was a ticking clock, but there were two other places I had interviewed with. What if those places were better? What if they would have made an even better offer? And that fear and that doubt and uncertainty is normally dealt with by the typical hiring organization with silence. There's no communication coming in the affirm stage other than, hey, thanks so much for accepting the job offer. We'll see you at headquarters on Monday, the 28th or whatever it may be. It's like there's nothing built in there. And so the way we counter this is we communicate during this time period, which is usually 2 weeks or more. Right? Stop and think about it. We accept a job offer. Most people don't start the next day. They usually have to give notice wherever they're at, especially top talent. I talked to some of the clients when we were there are over 50 case studies in the new book from all 7 continents. And one of the clients we previewed, or one of the companies we previewed, their executive team on average, when they bring in a new executive, it is 9 months from the time they accept the offer to the time they're in the seat. Now, this is
the Antarctica company, I guarantee.
Good guess. Close. There is an Antarctic example.
The next boat is in 6 months.
This is actually Lego, a corporation that most folks are familiar with, right? Lego's executives, on average, it's like 9 months between the time a job's extended and when they're actually in the seat. So the head of HR at Lego, Lauren Schuster, his philosophy, or the head of people rather, his philosophy is it's our job to continue to hold their hand during that time period, getting them up to speed, reaffirming their decision, making them feel like they're part of the team before they've even officially started. And how does the operation shift when we come at it with that type of mindset and attitude?
So once they've walked in the door, what happens next?
So the day they walk in the door is the activate phase. That's day 4. It's the only phase in the 8 phases that is 1 day total in terms of its training. And the secret for that day is I like everybody who's thinking about what do we do on day 1? I just want you to remember the classic song by Bonnie Raitt, country music legend, where she says, give them something to talk about. The secret on day 1 is to do something during day 1 that when they get home that night to their spouse, to their children, to their parents, their roommate, whoever they live with, and
How'd
that loved one says, how exactly, Jim? That's the first question that's going to happen. How was the first day on the job? How did it go? Because our loved ones know when we're having this type of a seminal career moment, we're starting a new job. What is your employee going to say? Are they going to have a story to tell? Are they going to be able to speak remarkably? Or are they going to say, well, I showed up and it kind of seemed like they didn't know that I was starting that day. No one was there. My manager, who's going to be my direct boss going forward, was out on vacation. The receptionist kind of didn't know what to do with me. Finally, somebody from HR showed up. They took me into a boardroom and they made me watch these videos that were filmed in the 70s that are all about sexual harassment. Left me wondering, is this a place where there's a lot of harassment happening? Then I had paperwork and I had to fill out all these things and decide what I wanted my withholding to be and how much money I wanted to go to my 401k and all of this. And I basically just sat in the room by myself filling out paperwork and watching these videos. Then they came and took me to lunch. And the person who was supposed to take me to lunch, as I mentioned, was out on vacation. So I went with 2 other people from my department who had no idea who I was. And they've known each other for years. So they were really cliquey talking to each other. Afterwards, I came back and they said, well, we're going to have you go to your desk, but we don't have your computer and phone set up yet. So why don't you just sit here? Actually, on second thought, why don't you just head home early today and we'll see you when we're prepared tomorrow. Now, the reason why that resonates with some of the people who are tuning in is because you've had that experience.
Oh my God. Yeah.
You've been that first day employee. And here's the question. How is your team's first day any different than your worst first day? Have you given them something to talk about?
That's good. That's really you're making me flashback. My son had an internship at a computer technology company. He was doing help desk support. He shows up. His boss rolls in. He goes, look, I'm heading out on vacation. He thumps a big old manual on his desk. He goes, read this for the next week. I'll see you next Monday. Here's what's wild. The kid had never had a job before. He goes, am I going to get paid for this? Like, he thought he wasn't getting paid because he wasn't doing work. They hadn't told him, totally, you're on the payroll, kid. You're okay. It was a horrible. Jim, it was horrible. Yeah.
And number one, I'm sorry that your son had that experience.
He recovered,
right? Because well, I'm sure he did. But you know what? Here's the thing. On one hand, we say that we've recovered. On the other hand, when we actually look at employee experience, our employees carry these scars of horrible job experiences into the next job. So here's the challenge. When they come to your job, your new hire comes in, they're bringing all the baggage of the bad things that happened to them throughout their career. And if you don't think that spills into the morale of your existing team or whatever you've built, their bad habits, their bad experiences, oh my goodness, it's absolutely terrible. I'll tell you a quick story. So one of the things I do when I consult with clients is the first place we start is an assessment where I look at all the things they're currently doing, including sitting in on new hire training. So I show up for a new hire training on Zoom. All right. They're bringing on 3 new members for their kind of customer support team. Now, the head of HR is running this training. There's 3 people and I'm there. They go through an 1.5 hour long presentation. It's death by PowerPoint. I'm there and I'm supposed to be, I'm having a hard time staying focused and I'm being paid to really focus on this, right? It's just mind numbing. Yeah. And we get to the end and the person says, are there any questions? And one of the employees raises their hand on Zoom and they say, okay, what's your question, ma'am? And she says, are we going to be paid for any of this?
Right.
And here's the thing. The person from HR was like, oh, of course you're being paid. You've started working here. And I'm thinking, if an employee has to ask, am I being paid for this? We see a fundamental breakdown in communication. We see a fundamental breakdown in expectation management. And we see a fundamental breakdown in whatever just happened that was so bad that the employee is asking, am I being paid for this? Because that is the only way that this behavior should be acceptable. The only way I can feel better with myself is at least I'm being compensated for this mind-numbing drubbing that just occurred.
Wow.
We can do better, friends. We can do better.
So what's the next phase?
The next phase is the acclimate phase. Now, the acclimate phase starts on day 2 on the job. and last for weeks or months. This is the longest phase in the 8-phase journey. And this is when the new employee is getting acclimated to your way of doing business. They're learning about their role. They're learning about the requirements of their role, the responsibilities of their role. They're learning about the other relationships in the organization that they're going to have to know and deal with. The challenge most organizations have is they expect folks to, like your son, read this manual and just figure it out. Or, hey, we're going to push you into the deep end of the pool. You've swum before. You'll be fine. Just swim around and sort this out. Our expectation management is completely misaligned. Our efforts to try to, quote unquote, teach our employees are really not about teaching them. They're about telling them. And we start telling them things that are completely useless. What do I mean by that? How often does day 2, day 3, day 7 on training look like? All right, so today we're going to talk about working in the call center here. And this is what you say when you first have a call come in. Oh, and by the way, you might get some weird randos calling that have got the wrong number. This happened to me one time, blah, blah, blah. And they go into this huge diatribe story about something that happened once. But because of the placement in the training cycle, the employee is now thinking, well, if you prioritize that as the first scenario you're telling me about, it must happen every day.
Yeah.
And now the employee is thinking, I don't know that I want this nightmare of a scenario you just described. We have a tendency when we're working and bringing new employees on to tell them the edge cases, to give them the weird little hypothetical examples, instead of telling them, so 80% of the time, this is what your job is going to look like. We're going to get to the 20% that's weird, and that's going to require a lot more focus and intention and nuance. But let me tell you what 80% of your day is going to look like. Phone call comes in, you answer. Customer's not so happy. We spend a little bit of time soothing them. We then get right to the point of their issue. Here's what the majority of phone calls are about. We address it this way. If not, here's how the person next to you is going to be your buddy for the next 30 days. That if you get into one of these edge cases, the 20% that isn't the normal, you've got resource and support right here. That's how you think strategically about what the acclimate phase is, as opposed to just throwing them to the wolves.
You make me think that part of the problem is you're having high competency employees. In other words, they're at unconscious competency in the job. So normal is like breathing. The only thing that actually gets the neurons firing are edge cases. So that's what they talk about. You really need somebody who just mastered the 80% to do the training, because they'll go, listen, most of the job is this. I just figured it out and I'm going to tell you now, as opposed to a 4 or 5 year employee that goes, that's boring. We're going to talk about the guy who called me who, had a pencil stuck in his ear or whatever, right? I mean,
Jim, you're spot on. And we need to actually make it intentional.
Yes.
The problem is most of the people doing our day 2, day 5, day 10 training have never been taught how to train. They know how to do the job. And we see this in sales departments all the time. This is where I see this in most organizations causing a huge issue. Most sales managers got their job because they were really good selling.
Sure.
So we promoted them to be a manager, right? Huge mistake. They're not good at managing people. They're good at selling. And now we take a sales manager and we're going to have them teach how to do this. What we normally get is them saying, well, here's the weird little nuance thing I do. And I know this, I know we're supposed to put it all into the CRM, but I just carry this notebook that I've been carrying for 30 years and I keep all my notes over here. People are laughing right now because they're like, oh my God, I had that sales training,
I know that
right?
guy.
I know that guy. This is the world we live in. We've got to think more intentionally. We would never expect a customer to come into our store. Let's pretend it's a retail environment. Imagine meeting a customer at the store. They come in the front door and we say, hey, welcome to Bob's Shoes. We got a lot of shoes. Go just find some you like. And if you find something interesting, bring it back to the cash register. We'll see you when you're ready. We would never do that. We would say, oh, what kind of shoes are you looking for? Let me guide you to the right spot. Let me show you what we specialize in these type of shoes. We don't carry these type of shoes. We would help them navigate the experience. But with our employees, it's like we just throw them into headquarters and we're like, go figure it out. Or in this day and age of remote work,
even worse.
It's even worse. Yeah. Turn on your Zoom and get ready for 9 hours of Zoom training on day 2. Oh my gosh, stop it. Let the beatings will commence. I mean, what is going on? Like, we just need to do better.
So let's say we get them through that phase. What happens next?
The next phase is the accomplish phase. In the accomplish phase, the employee achieves the goal they had when they originally decided to accept your job offer.
Okay.
Now, here's a place, Jim, where a lot of organizations miss the boat because they think, well, the thing the employee wants is a paycheck.
Right.
So we gave them the paycheck. So mission accomplished. No. Do they want to be paid? Absolutely. Do you need to pay attention to your compensation and your benefits packages? Absolutely. But these are the ante-up chips to sit down at the table and play the game.
Yep.
When I'm talking about accomplish, I'm talking about what is the vision that employee painted of their future when they were weighing your job offer. I'm going to have a new title. I'm going to have more money. That's going to allow me to send my kids to a better school or to go on a better vacation. And eventually, maybe after a year or two in the job, I might get promoted. That's going to be even more responsibility, more learning opportunity. I might be a traveling person then within the organization. So I'll get to go to interesting places. And every once in a while, if I do well, I'll get to bring my family along with me. And we'll get to go to the President's Club meeting in Aruba. And they're painting all these pictures, which, by the way, we're doing in the interview when we tell them about what their potential career would be. But then we're not asking them, what's your ideal version of this? We're not coming to them 30 days into the job and saying, okay, now that you're here, let's talk about some goals. Not our goals as an organization. You got to sell this much. You got to answer these many phone calls. You got to deliver this many contracts, whatever. But rather your personal goals. What are the skills you want to learn? Do you see this as a place where you'd like to spend the next 5 years? Or is this a place where you want to spend a year or two to step into a job somewhere else? Let's have an honest conversation. Because if that's your goal, let's help you achieve your goal. Why? Because I'm interested in getting people to phase 8. So I'm jumping ahead here.
Yep.
Phase 8 is the advocate phase. And the most powerful advocates you can have are people that are not on payroll. Let me repeat that. The most powerful advocates you can have for your employee base are former employees who are no longer on payroll, that when asked, what is the greatest place you ever worked? They say, it was a couple years ago, but I worked for Acme Corp. Let me tell you, that place, they cared about me. They taught me. They were focused on me. I felt taken care of. I felt learning. I felt growth. I felt possibility. As it turns out, the only reason I left there is because my spouse got a job in another city and we had to move. And this is before they had remote work. But you know what? Now that I think about it, maybe I should see if they're doing remote employees now. That place was amazing. Those type of advocates are worth their weight in gold. And the way we create that is when an employee leaves, we don't burn the bridge they walked across. So many leaders, when an employee comes in and says, I'm giving my 2-week notice, have one of two reactions. Reaction number 1, don't let the door hit you on the way out. You don't need to give 2 weeks. You're done today. I've had that experience as an employee.
Love you too.
Right?
Yep.
I mean,
love you right back.
All the goodwill, all the experience that has been built up gets burned in an emotional reaction.
Yeah.
Or the reaction is, oh my gosh, no, we need you to stay. How much? Let us give you more money. Let us give you more vacation. Let us give you more benefits. To which the employee is thinking, so let me get this right. You had more money to give, more vacation to give, more benefits to give. And the only reason you gave them is because you felt the threat of me leaving. I don't even want to be here. This is giving me insight as to how you thought about this relationship the entire time. Instead of saying, oh my gosh, you're heading somewhere new. Let's talk about it. Why are you going? What can we do to support you? What can we do to make your transition easy? How can we send you off with some fanfare and some celebration? Because your contributions to this organization have been so incredible that we want everyone in this organization to remember forever the role you played here in creating our legacy.
Wow.
That's a completely different conversation that leaves that employee thinking, maybe I shouldn't have accepted that job. Maybe I should stay here. Maybe I should go get some skills over there and then boomerang back. Boomerang employees are amazing. We want boomerang employees because they go out into the world, they learn new skills, they get new perspective, they get a different understanding of the industry, and then they come back with those ideas, with that, with that creativity, with those possibilities, and then they're infusing that into our culture.
Fabulous. That's great. I know there's a number of organizations that really manage their alumni network quite aggressively. Deloitte being one that I can name.
Deloitte's an amazing one. McKinsey is one.
Right.
The CEO of McKinsey has a great line about this. He says, we take great pride in the fact that there's a little bit of McKinsey in a lot of organizations
like
around the
that,
world.
yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that's different. It's a whole network. And it's like, if you're part of the McKinsey cabal, you know other people at other organizations. And where do you think McKinsey gets the majority of their consulting clients?
Absolutely.
That'd be from companies where they have embedded alumni who are like, I know some people who could have solved this. It's the people I used to work with at McKinsey.
Right.
We can be more strategic. We can do better.
That's phenomenal. Joey, I love the model. I love what you're talking about. I think it's a really relevant topic for people today. I mean, the relationship with our employees is difficult, and trying to love bomb them and make it different and engineer the experience, I think, is all really on point. How would people reach out to you if they wanted more Joey in their life, a little bit of Joey in their life?
So the easiest way to get a little bit of Joey in your life is to check out the book. It's called Never Lose an Employee Again. And it's available in whatever format works for you. The reason I share that is there are some people that love hardcover books. They want to take notes in the margins and feel that. Great, we've got a hardcover version. There's some people that are like, Joey, I'm all about my Kindle. I'm all about my Nook. I want to be able to highlight and search. Great, we've got an ebook. And if you've enjoyed the sound of my voice in our conversation today, I narrate the audiobook. Yes. So I will read the book to you as an audiobook. So you can get it in any way you want. Beyond that, the best place to find me is on my website, joeycoleman.com. That's Joey, like a baby kangaroo or a 5-year-old, Joey. Coleman, Coleman, like the camping equipment, but no relation. joeycoleman.com. There you'll find information about never lose a customer again, never lose an employee again, the speeches I do, the workshops I do, the consulting I do. So lots of opportunities. And if anybody listening, if I can be of help, you fill out the form and just say what you're looking for help with. Those come straight to me. Okay. And if there's any way I can support either your employee experience efforts or your customer experience efforts, it's something I'd be happy to explore.
Phenomenal. And so we'll end on this. So I know, looking at your background, that you sing.
I do.
What's your favorite song to sing?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. This, I'm willing, my favorite song to sing, I went to the University of Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. And so people who've listened this far, some of you just got excited. Some of you are like, oh my gosh, I have to discount everything he said. Don't worry. Yeah. How do you know if someone went to Notre Dame? Don't worry, Jim, they'll tell you. Yeah, exactly. So I just did. And I sang with the Notre Dame Glee Club. The song I have sung the most, and the song that I love singing, is the Notre Dame fight song. I had sang it in concert over 2,000 times before I graduated from college. I've sung it a lot of times since. Gotta love a little bit of a rah-rah fight song football singing when you get a chance. So that's an easy one that just is right there.
Cool. Joey, this was awesome. I really appreciate your time, and good luck out there.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate it. And thanks to everybody for listening in. So appreciate you joining our conversation. And I wish you all the best as you go enhance those experiences in the first 100 days of the relationship and beyond.
Nice. This podcast is brought to you by the CEO Project. At the CEO Project, we work with CEOs to help them grow their business. And our members represent billions of dollars of revenue and profit. And frankly, amongst all of us, we've probably made every mistake in the book, including some you haven't made yet. So if you want to learn from the experience of a bunch of really seasoned CEOs, we're a great place to hang out. In this podcast, what you're going to hear are some of those ideas, concepts, and things that are just going to help you on your journey. If you want to find out more, reach out to us at theceoproject.com, or you can contact me personally at jim@theceoproject.com. Happy listening.
Thanks for listening to the Lazy CEO podcast. We'll see you next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes, and check out our website, www.theceoproject.com.